Europe by expanding our panel series to encompass a global perspective, aptly titled Mapping Global Populism, MGP. Our objective is to construct a comprehensive understanding of populism worldwide, future monthly sessions. Today, we will examine our 15th session of the Mapping Global Populism panel series. The session will examine theocracy, radicalism, and Islamist secular populism in Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. As a testament to our commitment to knowledge dissemination, we're going to write a panel report and share the video recording of this panel on our website and YouTube channel. These resources serve as invaluable references for scholars, policymakers, and the wider audience concerned about the contemporary challenges to global democracy posed by populist and authoritarian politics. In the ongoing journey of our panel series, we extend our gratitude to all the scholars and experts who contribute their extensive insights. With this, we introduce our esteemed moderator and distinguished panelists for today's intriguing discussion. So, today, our panel is going to be moderated by Dr. Simon Wotmau, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Leeds in Germany and a non-resident research fellow in the University Program on Authoritarianism at ECPS. He was awarded his PhD from the European University Institute in April 2017 with a dissertation titled Democracy in the Shadow of a Deep State, Guardian Hybrid Regimes in Turkey and Thailand. Dr. Wotmau research interests sit at the intersection of global and comparative politics and include varieties of post-authoritarian states, the political sociology of the state, the role of the military in regime change, and the foreign policy of post-authoritarian states in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. His work has been published in Politics, Religion and Ideology, Urban Studies, and Turkish Review. Today, Dr. Hélène Thibault will be our first speaker, presenting on the topic Counter-Extremism and Authoritarian Governance in Tajikistan. Dr. Thibault is Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan. Her research focuses on the politics of Central Asia, as well as gender and religious identities. Recent publications include co-edited volumes Uyat and the Culture of Shame in Central Asia and the Political Economy of Education Research in Central Asia, Open Access at Belgrave. Current projects on the repatriation of Central Asian foreign terrorist fighters and the decriminalization of sex work in Central Asia are underway. Our second speaker, Dr. Zakia Deli, who is former Deputy Minister of Justice of Afghanistan and a professor in the Department of Political Sciences and International Relations at Kabul University, before joining East-West Center. She was a member of the Preparatory Contact Committee for Peace with Taliban in 2019 in Doha, Qatar, and also served on many senior government commissions in the government of Afghanistan, including the High Commission for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders of Afghanistan, High Council of Women of Afghanistan, High Commission for the Prevention of Violence Against Women, Political Parties and Civil Society Commission of the Supreme National Reconciliation Council of Afghanistan, and the Commission on Women and Human Rights of the Supreme National Reconciliation Council of Afghanistan. Dr. Adeli also served as Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Negah Mosej, Editor-in-Chief of Contemporary Thought, Kadib Magazine, and a member of the editorial board of Kadib, Foreign Policy and Middle East Studies from 2013 to 2021. She is the author of 3 books, UN Security Council and Afghanistan Developments in 2007, Postcolonial Situation and the Municipality of Afghan Constitutions 2015, and First National Conference Pamphlet on Studying the Status of Women in Afghanistan 2009. Dr. Adeli has also written more than 30 scientific articles. Her pre-recorded video will be integrated into the panel's program flow. Dr. Zahur Ahmadwani will be our third speaker, presenting on the topic Gender Dynamics and the Fight of Afghan Women under Taliban Rule. Dr. Wani is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Sciences, Lovely Professional University, Jalandhar, Punjab, and the deputy editor of South Asia Research. He obtained his PhD in 2018 from the Central University of Gujarat and the dynamics of the geopolitical triangle involving India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan since 2001. His areas of teaching and specialization, apart from Kashmir studies, include international politics, political theory, and Northwestern South Asia. He is writing about Afghanistan's Taliban puzzle, geopolitics of Afghanistan-India-Pakistan triangle, critical theory, and gender and neoliberalism. This panel's fourth and last speaker is Amir Mahdavi, who will make a presentation on the rise of populism in Iran, inequality, class conflict, and nationalist authoritarianism. Mahdavi is a PhD candidate in political science at the University of Connecticut. His research focuses on the political economy of authoritarian regimes with an emphasis on the Middle East. He holds 2 master's degrees, one in Middle East Studies from Harvard University and one another in history from Brandeis University. In addition to publishing a book chapter and 2 peer-reviewed journal articles, his analyses of political affairs have appeared in The Washington Post, The Guardian, Foreign Affairs, and Al Monitor. Before pursuing graduate studies in the US, he worked as a journalist and editor in Iran. As a reminder, we do our Q&A session after the completion of the presentations. Our respected participants can write their questions in the chat box or by raising their virtual hand and pose their questions in person. So now I turn it over to Dr. Simon, who will provide an overview of this panel's subject matter and administer the panel. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Stavroula, for that fantastic introduction to our panel today. Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody once again to our panel today. Just a quick announcement. Unfortunately, Kathleen Collins cannot make the panel today, and so we're down from 5 to 4 speakers. That gives us a little bit of leeway, actually. We can probably extend the Q&A time, and if speakers need a little bit of extra time in their presentations, that will be absolutely fine. So we have a wonderful panel ready today, and we're already up to our 15th panel in the Mapping Global Populism series, which has been a runaway success for the ECPS. And today, the topic is Theocracy, Radicalism, and Islamist Secular Populism in Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. And we're covering a range of topics. I think it's going to be a fantastic panel. What I might do before I pass over to Helen is just make a change in the order, in the sense that what I think we'll do is have our Q&A directly after each speaker has spoken, because we do have extra time in the schedule. So each of our speakers will speak for, I would say, 20 minutes. And we'll follow that up, 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll follow that up with 10 minutes of Q&A. So our first speaker this afternoon is Dr. Hélène Thibault, who is going to present on counter-extremism and authoritarian governance in Tajikistan. And without any further ado, I will pass over to Dr. Thibault for her presentation.
All right, thank you. I think I just received a message that my internet connection is unstable, so I hope that it won't create any problems. But thank you for the invitation. So as it was mentioned, I work and live in Kazakhstan, and my research now focuses on Kazakhstan mostly because I live there, but I did extensive research in Tajikistan in 2010-11, and it's interesting for me to revisit some of the conclusions I reached back then from my PhD research, and to see what is the evolution of counter-extremism measures in Tajikistan. So I'm really grateful for this panel. I'm looking forward to hear the other speakers as well. And since Kathleen Collins is not there, and I think some of our topics were overlapping, I'll change my presentation a little bit and also talk about what she referred to as secular authoritarianism. So if we talk about Tajikistan, so the topic I decided on is counter-extremism and authoritarian governance in Tajikistan. So that would imply that Tajikistan has an extremism problem. So my first question is, does Tajikistan have an extremism problem? And the question is yes, but not to an extent that is often portrayed in the media and also in academic literature. After independence, 1991, a lot of observers, mostly journalists, but also some scholars would argue that Central Asia was doomed to become a hotbed of Islamic radicalization, but we haven't seen that happening 30 years later. However, it doesn't mean that that is completely exempt of radicalization and radicalism. There were instances of extremist groups operating and perpetrating attacks on the territory of Central Asia. However, the numbers are quite limited, never to the extent that some observers predicted. Edward Lemon published a report in 2018 saying that in Central Asia, in the course of the last 20 years, there were only 19 attacks, terrorist attacks perpetrated on the territory of Central Asia. So this number is extremely limited for a region, that is allegedly a hotbed of Islamic radicalism. So the radicalization, one could say, is actually quite limited, and more people have died in Central Asia as a result of not terrorist attacks, but as repression in Central Asia. I mean, in overall. Repression for participating in protests, for instance. So the number of casualties related to terrorism and extremism is actually very low. And a lot of the recruitment, because Central Asians and Tajiks have joined extremist movements. However, when recruitment happens, it's mostly in migration context. So a lot of Edward Lemon and Noah Tucker have written about it quite recently, actually. So recruitment into extremist movements is very much connected to migration. And one of the particularities of Tajikistan is that it's a country which economy is quite underdeveloped, really struggling, and it's highly dependent on the remittances of migrants. So migration here really plays a role in fostering extremism in Central Asia. And what is interesting is that, like I mentioned, there isn't a lot of terrorist attacks taking place in Central Asia, but when Central Asians are involved, the attacks they were involved in recently, and the most recent one was earlier this year, 2024, in Moscow, with the Crocus attack in Moscow, in which Tajiks were involved and have been already quickly identified and prosecuted for that. So the recruitment takes place abroad, and attacks takes place abroad too. So as a region, Central Asia is relatively spared of terrorism and extremism, even though some of its citizens are involved in this. But we shouldn't forget, however, that as I mentioned, so Tajiks have joined radical groups, extremist groups, like ISIS, for instance. And have around 400 Tajiks, or maybe up to 500. But this actually includes women and children. So, and there were actually a lot of women and children also who found themselves in ISIS territory in Syria and Iraq. And the most spectacular instance of that is when a top security official from the special forces of Tajikistan actually defected to ISIS in 2014. Maybe some of you are familiar with this case, Gulmorod Halimov. And this was quite worrisome for the Tajik authorities, with reason, because he had a lot of intel about, Tajikistan security environment. And he left with a bang, and also encouraged other Tajiks to join ISIS. But now that ISIS has been defeated and has morphed into, some multiple branches, including Islamist ISIS-K, they still are active in recruiting Central Asians and people from all around the world. But in the recent report, I mentioned Lemon and Tucker, they mentioned that there is no evidence that there is mass recruitment like there used to be in the case when ISIS was active in Syria and Iraq. Again, so going back to the question, does Tajikistan have an extremism problem? Well, the answer is yes, to some extent. But this answer should be nuanced with, well, something that I researched previously is that the threat of extremism is greatly exaggerated and used as a way to eliminate political opponents of all kinds of allegiances, yeah, not only Islamic political positionists. Any form of mobilization is well repressed under the cover of extremism charges, and this is the case for the Islamic Revival Party of Tajikistan, which used to be a legitimate political actor in Tajikistan. So Tajikistan is particular in that sense that it is the only Central Asian state where an Islamic political party was legally registered and legitimately participating in elections until it was put on the list of extremist organizations in 2015 on charges of extremism and of organizing a coup, which failed, obviously. So given authoritarian, Tajikistan is really characterized by very strong authoritarian practices in which political dissent is absolutely impossible. And the threat of extremism has been used to sideline any form of political mobilization. And I will come back a little bit more on that in a moment. The extent of repression is really, well, repression is really extensive, and it applies, as I mentioned, to the Islamic Party of Tajikistan, but also to maybe some of you are familiar with the region of Badakhshan in the south of Tajikistan, a region that is bordering Afghanistan, and where a religious and ethnic minority lives. The Pamiris, they are Ismailis, yeah, Shiite Ismailis. So they are, yeah, an ethnic and religious minority. This region has been at the center of a lot of political struggles in the last few years, and there were recurrent protests from local populations demanding more representation at the regional level. This is a region that is quite isolated from the rest of Tajikistan. And every time those protests turned deadly because of state repression. And in the latest protests in 2021, 2022, some activists who were not necessarily taking part in the protests received very long prison sentences, up to 25 years, for advocating for peace. This is the case of one journalist, a female journalist, who was imprisoned for 25 years recently. So these cases have gathered international attention because of the very harsh punishment that they have received. Her name is Mama Choyeva. I think, international organizations have, human rights defenders have picked up on the story because of the unfairness of this judgment. The Islamic Revival Party members who were this party which was put on the list of extremist organizations. A lot of the former members, mostly those who were in leadership positions, have been either imprisoned or they are in exile. And while they are in exile, they are also chased, and it's many of them are political refugees in Europe. Some of them sought safety in Russia, but this is no longer a safe place for those who were members of this party. And what is quite shocking is that even their family members are chased by the Tajikistani authorities. So the brothers and mothers who stayed behind, and even those who are in Russia, are targeted there. And there were instances of deportations, illegal deportations of family members of the former, who were formerly associated, even if they were themselves not involved in politics, but just by association. Lawyers who were defending the members of Islamic Party were also imprisoned. There were at least 2 instances of that. So it's guilt by proxy, just by being assimilated. So repression is very strong. And so this is one aspect of how, well, the Tajikistani authorities are invoking extremism for repressive purposes. And now that, since my colleague is Kathleen Collins, I think she was going to talk a little bit about that, but about this aspect of authoritarian secularism. So this counter-extremism, I argued with Lemon in a joint article in 2019, that counter-extremism is not only repressive, it's also performative, in the sense that the Tajikistani authorities are not only trying to suppress some political actors and ideologies, but also encouraging ways of life that they consider that is safe and according to national traditions. So one thing that maybe our audience and our panelists have heard about is the regulation of female clothing in Tajikistan that many scholars have looked at as well, including myself. So the regulation of female clothing as a way to ensure the secularity of the state. So hijab has been banned in schools and state institutions already for a long time. However, this year, very recently, there was a new law that is part of the law on celebrations of rituals that actually has a new paragraph mentioning that it is citizens should conform to national traditions and not wear foreign clothing. So the import, sell, and promotion of foreign clothing is forbidden in public places. And many in Tajikistan, including police forces, have interpreted it as a way to forbid the woman from wearing a hijab, which is considered foreign. So this has been decried by most human rights organizations as a violation of religious rights, because we're talking here not in schools, but in public places such as the street or the market. So anywhere outside your home is forbidden to wear foreign clothes. So this is a way for the Tajik authorities to regulate personal behavior and encourage secular behavior, but which is an infringement on religious rights. In 2018, the Ministry of Culture actually published a guide for women, appropriate clothes for women, for girls, and for women of all ages. The book has hundreds of pages, photos of how to dress and which occasions, etc. So there's a very normative content here, and a normative content. And I also wanted to include also, and I'll finish on that. That there is also great regulations of religious education. When I was doing my research in Tajikistan in 2010-11, there were 6 madrasas which were operating in the country, and now there's only 1, for instance. Private religious education has been outlawed completely. So the only possible way to receive religious education is through your parents, so this is allowed, or through this institution of higher education, which is located in Dushanbe, the capital Dushanbe. So we see that there are a lot of restrictions regarding the practice of religion and this attempt to encourage secular behavior. But at the same time, the factors that could be encouraging extremism or extremist views are not tackled because, I mean, in the book I published in 2018, one of the factors I mentioned as why are people gravitating towards extremist views is the lack of fairness and the feeling of exclusion that people have, exclusion from economic success, but also to a fair life and a just life. I think it's not only about poverty, but it's about feelings of exclusion and unfairness in the overall system in which people live. So I will stop here, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. That's fantastic. I really appreciate that short but very, very, very informative contribution. So, as I mentioned, because Kathleen can't make it, and Dr. Adeli, our second speaker, is still on the way into the panel, we can have our Q&A for Dr. Thibault immediately. I know I've got some questions. As Gabriela mentioned, there are kind of two approaches to your questions. You can, if you're shy, you can either post them as text in the chat, and I'll read them out to Helen for you. Otherwise, you can just use the raised hand function, which you can reach through the react button at the bottom of your screen, and it looks like that, raised hand. So I invite questions. I'll go first, actually. I'll use my privilege as the chair to ask the first question. Helen, as you were speaking, it struck me that Tajikistan is kind of distinctive. I know there's a lot of repression across Central Asia, but it's kind of distinctive. And I was thinking about the potential legacies of the Tajik civil war, because I know you mentioned the Islamic Renaissance Party was only banned in 2015, but the party was one of the leading protagonists in that civil war. And I'm wondering if there's a legacy in terms of the way in which the civil war panned out, maybe in terms of discourse and the way the state approaches counter-terrorism, but maybe also in terms of the state apparatus and the way it approaches the management of dissent. So I was hoping to draw you out a bit on that, if there's a historical legacy there.
So you're right to point out that it's the participation of the Islamic Revival Party into politics is a legacy of the Civil War, because they were the main actor and the main protagonist or antagonist, to the authorities, but they were not alone. So in the media, less so among scholars, but in the media, it was often portrayed as a war between Islamist opposition forces and the secular government, which was inherited from Soviet times. But most scholars have agreed that this was a more of a regional a war between regional factions, and not necessarily an Islamic uprising. And there was actually no other option when they signed the peace. It was signed between Imam Ali Rahman, the current president, who's been in power since 1992, the longest lasting Central Asian president in Central Asia, and the leader of the Islamic Revival Party, Said Abdullah Nouri, who passed away from cancer actually a couple of years ago. He was succeeded by Muhyiddin Kabiri, who is now in exile. But so they had no choice but to integrate the Islamic Party into it was part of the peace deal, the peace agreement, to integrate this party into the governmental structure and the political system in general. And I think well, according to the Islamic Revival Party, one of the reasons why they were outlawed is because they were gaining more popularity, and the authorities understood that. Yeah, so there might be, of course, a secular legacy to this, in the sense that the Soviet Union was very hostile, yeah, towards any form of religious opposition. So there's definitely one aspect is that this hostility towards religious elements, but also fear of the popularity of the party. They were banned not long after a parliamentary election was held, and according to the RPT, the rationale is that they saw that we were too popular, and then they decided to ban us.
Thank you. Bülent, you have a question. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for this intriguing presentation. Actually, it's a bit depressive for me because it reminds me what we lived in Turkey as journalists, as academic, as civil society activists, unfortunately. My question is related to the neighboring countries, actually. How do Tajikistan counter extremism policies and extremely staunch secularism align with or differ from those of its Central Asian neighbors, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, or Turkmenistan? What role does regional cooperation and international influence play in shaping Tajikistan approach to this so-called counter extremism? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good question. I'm not extremely familiar with the policies adopted by Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, but if I compare with Kazakhstan, for instance, I would say, well, Tajikistan stands out in handing out extremely long and harsh prison sentences. Yeah, so we're talking about 20 years. Yeah, for sometimes accusations that are, I mean, in many occasions that are unfounded. We don't see the equivalent, I think, in the neighboring countries, such very long prison sentences. I am not aware of that in Kazakhstan. I mean, there were people prosecuted on charges of extremism in Kazakhstan, but never for such long lifetime. These are basically lifetime prison sentences, right? But again, I think, yeah, there's this idea, this Soviet legacy is still strong of hostility towards religion. I think they share this, the Central Asian states share this legal legacy, and well, not only legal but ideological, that religious movements are by definition something to worry about. Yeah, they are anti-systemic. Yeah, they are incompatible with democracy. So that's why in all the Central Asian countries, it is impossible, it is illegal to found a political party that is based on religious values. It's actually in the constitution. Yeah, so in that they share similarities in those legal amendments that make religious parties completely illegal, including Tajikistan, but which wasn't the case until 2015. Yeah, so they share this, but yeah, I would say other countries are less. I would say probably Kyrgyzstan has the loosest approach, probably, to counter extremism. Well, maybe I'm wrong, actually. No, don't take my word for it. But yeah, they share similarities. And what is interesting is that, as I mentioned, a lot of people who are accused of extremism by the Tajik authorities are located in Russia for whatever reason. Maybe for work, maybe because they don't feel safe in Tajikistan, but they are. So Russia is complicit of authoritarian repression in Tajikistan, because they contribute to their deportation, which is made under the undercover. Yeah, so they are enabling this form of extrajudicial and extraterritorial repression.
Yeah, maybe and a follow-up question, dear professor. I wonder about what kind of discourse or narrative they use to justify or legitimize what they do in Tajikistan. If they do really need to justify, if they need such a thing, how could they use
Mm-hmm.
narrative?
I mean, often like it's based on like the journalist I mentioned, yeah, the Pamiri journalist who received a 21 year prison sentence, yeah, Mamat Shoyeva. She, for instance, was accused of extremism and of plotting a coup to overthrow the government. She confessed of this. So not only the accusations sometimes are weak, but there is no one really to contest those accusations. But sometimes there is confessions made under duress. So people confess to whatever crimes they are accused of. So here is your proof, yeah, to support the case from the prosecutor, yeah, that there is a confession. So of course this person must be guilty. So, but to the population, I think the narrative is that we are protecting you from extremist forces that are acting in our country. And this is what we need to do to protect the Tajikistani population.
Thank you, Dr. Thibault. We have a question in the chat, and it relates to social structure, and in particular, how social structure plays a role in increasing extremism in Islamic countries, but more particularly in Tajikistan, with a particular focus on the effect of women.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, yeah, I think the fact that there is a lot of focus on women and I think the hijab issue is making a lot of people angry because it's a violation of religious rights and human rights to practice your religion. So this is something that is quite problematic. It has always been problematic for the last 20 years, yeah? So Islamic clothing was seen as, well, always regarded as by the authorities, yeah, as a sign of maybe radicalization, yeah? And probably, yeah, there's no equivalent, there's no equation, yeah, between increased religious practice and extremism, right? But in recent years, this has been the pressure on Islamic clothing has really increased, and it has really risen this year, right? With this unofficial ban on hijab everywhere. Even though the law is vague enough that that's why the authorities can avoid criticism, yeah, outright criticism, because the law is vague, but on the ground it can be really interpreted by police forces as that, yeah. And I think, yeah, this is this particular decision is angering a lot of yeah, a lot of people, and including a lot of officials whose relatives, mothers, sisters, yeah, wives are wearing hijabs, yeah. So I've been to Tajikistan this year, but this was before the ban, and I would be curious to see how people react to this, and if it's actually implemented. So there were instances, people reported that it was enforced, but I don't know to what extent is systematically enforced. Also, I wanted to nuance that. Yeah, it doesn't mean that from day one all women started stop wearing hijabs, but the pressure has been accumulating over the years. But yeah, this can definitely be an issue, and women can also not attend mosques in Tajikistan. Women are there's no space for women to go to mosque at all. In everywhere in the world, yeah, in every mosque around the world, there's always a space reserved for women to pray, but not in Tajikistan. Women cannot go. So there's really yeah, an infringement on religious rights. There were also a couple of years ago pressure on men to cut their beards, for instance, if their beard was too long. There were cases reported of men who were forcibly shaved by the police. So it's not only women, men too, but yeah, this can only create resentment.
Indeed. It sounds quite Taliban-esque, which is a good segue because we're going to move now on to the next presentation. Unfortunately, Dr. Adeli couldn't be here in person today, so we're going to present their video. And just a brief introduction, the video or the presentation by video from Dr. Adeli is titled The Taliban's Totalitarian Regime, Governance, Extremism, Control. And Dr. Adeli is now at the East-West Center in Honolulu, but before that was the Deputy Minister of Justice in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and a professor in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at Kabul University until the Taliban took over again in 2021. So unfortunately, we won't have a chance for a Q&A, but we will have the chance to hear and watch Dr. Adeli's presentation now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. Today, I would like to talk about the Taliban's totalitarian regime, its governance structure, and the way in which it has imposed severe control over Afghanistan since they take over in August 2021. And in this presentation, I will explore how the Taliban have systematically centralized power and how this regime functions without any electoral process or legal accountability. Let me share the screen and then I will continue the presentation. Let's start with the features of the Taliban totalitarian regime, which are including centralization of power, suppression of dissent, ideology as a tool, strict censorship and media control, and homogenization of the people as a significant element in the Taliban totalitarian regime. When the Taliban took power in Afghanistan, one of the first steps they took was abolition of constitutional law in Afghanistan. By doing this, they erased the legal framework that once guaranteed political representation and civil rights. They also dissolved the parliament, which had 249 members who represented the people. And they also abolished the other democratic institutions, such as the Independent Commission for Overseeing the Implementation of Constitution, the Independent Election Commission of Afghanistan, the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, and Ministry of Women's Affairs, the only ministry which advocated for women abolished by the Taliban in 2021. And they also dissolved the political parties. And for now, there is no any political party in Afghanistan which be active. By abolishing the democratic institutions, the Taliban are sure there is no longer a system of checks and balances in Afghanistan. Regarding centralization of power, I would say the Taliban's governance structure is built around a single figure, Hebatullah Khundzadeh, as a supreme leader of the Taliban. That's true. Ministers exist, but they hold no real authority. All the ministers and other government bodies operate under direct orders from the Taliban leader without any decision-making power of their own. Additionally, all political and legal decisions must be ratified by the leader, reinforcing a highly centralized and non-electoral regime. It is clear that this kind of governance lacks transparency and accountability, where power is concentrated in the hands of one individual. Obviously, this structure erases any possibility of democracy and leaves citizens with no say in how they are governed. Another action of the Taliban's totalitarian regime is their ban on political parties. Prior to the Taliban's rise to power, there were over 70 registered political parties in Afghanistan, but now the regime has banned all political activities. This means that Afghanistan has effectively become a one-party state where only the Taliban holds power. The Taliban have also violently suppressed civil protests. Since their return, there have been reports of over 100 peaceful demonstrations being broken up, with protesters beaten, arrested, and in some cases disappeared. In 2022, the Taliban issued a decree banning any gathering or protest that was not pre-approved by the Ministry of Interior. That is clear. The Ministry of Interior does not allow to anybody to protest. Monopolize of power is another action that has taken by Taliban, and they are trying monopolize power by elimination of democratic institutions, by suppression of political opposition, prohibition of political parties, control of media and communication, by suppression of protests and demonstrations. And also they use religious authority through the Ministry of the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice to enforce its ideology and control daily life, making it difficult for any opposition to arise. The Taliban use extremist tactics like public executions, flogging to instill fear and maintain control. Typically, ideology is an important issue and important element in the totalitarian regimes. And in the Taliban's regime, ideology becomes a tool for justifying extreme centralization of power, eliminating opposition, and ensuring obedience from the population by aligning their role with religious and cultural narratives. The Taliban bans forms of cultural expression that they deemed un-Islamic or contrary to their interpretation of values. This included bans on music, dancing, traditional Afghan arts, and celebration, effectively raising cultural diversity and promoting a singular way of life. By cultural separation, they are replacing traditional cultural symbols with their own, prohibiting the celebration of Nowruz as a Persian New Year. And they are destructing historical heritage and eliminating ancient statues. And also they are suppressing music, dance, and other forms of artistic expression. Homogenization of people is a significant element and significant issue in the Taliban's totalitarian regime, and they are trying to homogenize the people by enforcing uniformity through fear and violence, by control over institutions such as media, civil society, culture, education, and by imposing ideological conformity through decrees. Actually, the Taliban controls both public behavior and private life. The people of Afghanistan are not only forbidden from expressing dissent, but their everyday freedoms how they dress, what they listen to, and how they socialize are dictated by the regime. According to a report from the United Nations on June 4th in current year in 2024, the Taliban punished 63 individuals in Sarpol in Afghanistan. And according to another report from August 15, 2021 to June 15, 2022, there were 243 extrajudicial killings during the period from August 15, 2021 to June 15, 2022, a minimum of 160 extrajudicial executions of former government and security officials by members of the Taliban have been documented by UNAMA. Regarding women's rights and restrictions on women, I think it is clear and everybody knows about that in the world. Since the Taliban came to power, they have imposed some of the harshest restrictions on women's rights everywhere in the world. The Ministry for Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice also plays a significant role in restricting women's freedoms, enforcing dress codes that require women to cover the entire body, and preventing them from appearing in public space without a relevant male. To conclude, I would say the Taliban's regime has effectively dismantled Afghanistan's democracy and replaced it with a theocratic and totalitarian system. From the abolition of democratic institutions to the suppression of political parties and the violent repression of civil protests, the regime operates with complete control. Their non-electoral governance, centered around the leader, and the imposition of extreme restrictions on media and civil society have left the Afghan people without a voice or basic rights. Unfortunately, the impact of their role is especially felt by women, who face some of the most severe restrictions in the world. As we watch Afghanistan's future unfold, it is important to remember the cost of this totalitarian regime, not just in terms of lost political freedoms, but also in the erosion of human rights, social freedoms, and the possibility for a democratic futures. Thank you for your attention and for your listening.
All right. It is a pity that we don't have Dr. Adeli here in person on the panel today for a Q&A. But fortunately, we do have Dr. Zahor Ahmedwani here, who is going to dig deeper on the topic of gender under the Taliban. So I think I see you, Dr. Wani. Yes?
Yeah, I am here. Just wait a minute.
Do you have a PowerPoint that you'd like to load up?
No, I don't have any PowerPoint presentation. So I will share my ideas. I have written some ideas, so I will share those ideas with you.
All right, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I am visible now.
You are not
the camera. There it is.
Yeah, just.
But perhaps you could adjust the camera a little. Perfect.
Is it fine?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on today's discussion and for this great opportunity to meet you people first time and to learn new ideas related to the title of the discussion. So let me begin with a very simple question related to my talk, related to my presentation, not a talk basically. What is happening is a terrible tragedy uh, in Afghanistan. So I don't think anyone can deny it except those who are in power. But if we dive deep into this question, then there are some other questions, which arise. Some of them, like who is responsible for this terrible tragedy, how the current tragedy occurs, and what are the key lessons can be drawn from this bleak situation that exists now. So these are some fundamental questions that one need to understand, one need to comprehend. So while I try to comprehend these fundamental questions by myself and then relate them with the contemporary situation of Afghanistan, so then it becomes, very, very imperative to look at the history of this conflict-ridden society. But it is not possible here, particularly to give a comprehensive presentation on the genealogy of Afghanistan. Otherwise, the historical part is very, very important to understand the current situation. I don't think that without, looking into the history, that we can understand any problem. Very comprehensively. So, how could we understand the current problems in Afghanistan? What I am going to do is to give a brief overview of history related to the Afghanistan. Then I will move to the external intervention, because external intervention also plays a fundamental part. And then I ultimately, while doing the first two aspects, so they will help me to build a case on the position of women. Why I'm doing this? Because I believe it is not an easy topic to deal. So I can't say, the general thing is related to Afghanistan. So this is the one thing. And another thing, let me be very honest with you people, that what I'm going to share, I'm sharing my fragmented ideas. And I would highly appreciate if you people tear down my arguments or my things related, today's discussion. So when we see the foundation of the sovereign nation state, it was laid by Ahmad Shah Durrani, formerly known as the Ahmad Khan Abdali, in 1747. So since then, what we see, history is a tumultuous one. But there's one thing as well, that this country, it is a multi-ethnic diversity or multi-ethnic country as well. And another important point related to the history or to the Afghanistan is that it is location. You people might, all of may be aware about this, that it is a landlocked country. So, the landlocked territory at the crossroads between Central Asia, Iran, India, and China, that has given it its vital geopolitical significance. So, in today's world, when we people have to understand any conflict, so we have to understand the geopolitical significance, geopolitical of that particular thing, a particular country as a particular conflict as well. So while doing so, an article written by Nigel Allan in 2001, the title of the article, it was Defining Place and People in Afghanistan. So Nigel highlights the complexities that outsiders encounter when attempting to understand Afghanistan's intricate social fabric. So he also emphasizes the significant role that ethno-cultural diversity plays in shaping the nation, particularly in conjunction with its diverse geographical characteristics. So that is why it is so geopolitically, significant. So he also noticed that Afghanistan is a home to over 50 distinct ethnic groups, each speaking one of the approximately 45 languages and dialects, as reported by the Summer Institute of Linguistics as well. So this linguistic and cultural variety, it not only reflects the rich tapestry of Afghan identity, but it also underscores the challenges in defining national unity amid such diversity. One can argue, I mean, anyone can does this, that locality and physical space are critical to understanding Afghanistan's contemporary history.
I'm not sure if the connection has been dropped or if we should give Dr. Wani a few seconds to come back to us. He may have dropped out. Dr. Wani, can you hear us?
Excuse me, did you call me?
Okay, yes, yes. Am I audible now?
Yes, you dropped out for a bit, but please continue.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So what I'm saying that this profound connection between place and identity, it complicates external efforts to engage with Afghanistan as a strategies that might work in one region may be effective or even counterproductive in another. Ultimately, one can highlight or underlines the necessity for a nuanced and counter-sensitive approach when addressing Afghanistan's social political landscape. Very, very important to understand the position of women as well. I will come to that. I mean, a while. So it recognizes that understanding the interplay between people and place is crucial for any meaningful engagement with this particular country. So this country, it has long been a focal point of geopolitical entanglements that is deeply rooted in its history of invasions that we see, interventions and internal conflicts among rival factions. So there are, I was talking about the multi-ethnic, so there are these rival factions as well within Afghanistan. So it is, then what we see historically, if we will look at it, so various powers, including the Alexander the Great, British colonial forces, South Union, and in the recent past, UN-led NATO forces, they have sought to exert the control over Afghanistan in order to expand their influence in the region. So each of these interventions, why I'm talking about these interventions, because they reflect not only the desire for territorial gain, but also the complex interplay of cultural, economic, and military interests. So, if just for a minute, if Alexander the Great, conquest, if we look at his conquest, it marked the beginning of a long history of foreign influence, establishing Afghanistan as a vital corridor for trade and cultural exchange. Similarly, British empires attempted to secure control in the 19th century, famously known as the Great Game. When they make it a buffer state, so that is also the crucial for maintaining imperial interests in this region. So then what we see the South invasion, so that has also further complicated Afghanistan's geopolitical landscape. So that ignited a brutal conflict that not only devastated the country, but also became a, crucial point of Cold War tension. So at one point of time, so it was the case. And here, whatever we see in today's world, so basically it started from the Cold War. I mean, in contemporary times. The subsequent rise of various factions and then what we have seen in Afghanistan and during internal strife, after when South Union left the country. So one of the ways in which foreign interests have sought to gain power over the area is by destabilizing the social fabric of the country, by challenging its tribal and customary practices, as one of the pertinent thinker Ahmed Ghosh has rightly argued. So if we see Michael McKinley, he has written an article, "Who Lost Afghanistan in Foreign Affairs." So what he says that basically he was building a case that 2 decades of miscalculations and failed policies by Western intervention. So then, if we look at it, how others look at this Afghanistan. So there is this former National Security Advisor General Maxter. He echoed the sentiments of many when he declared that Afghanistan is a humanity problem. I quote, "A humanity problem on modern day frontier between barbarism and civilization," unquote. And that the United States now, what he talks about is the lack, the will, I quote, "to continue the effort in the interest of all humanity," unquote. So while looking at this, we have very pertinent uh, discussion raised by Maria Marxo in his article, that is titled "The Challenge of Liminality for International Relations Theory." what the author mentions in that article, it is the, I mean, I quote, perpetual potential war zone, unquote. So in which disorder, tension, power struggles could suddenly erupt. Okay, if today is Taliban, tomorrow someone may come and capture this land. So, and this hegemonic discourse on failed statehood, some says fragile, some says rogue, and some says colonial specialization that contributed to what Nivi Manchanda argued. I quote, the control of Afghan as a zone of exception and of permanent crisis, unquote. So for decades, I mean, in simple terms, we can say Afghanistan have endured the devastating consequences of prolonged conflict, leading to widespread poverty,
Simon, you are mute.
I was just saying, I think it might be that Dr. Wani's connection is too stable.
yeah. Okay, great. Am I audible now?
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. So, one of the most pressing issues within this context is the significant inequality between men and women. So, historically, if we see Afghanistan, women in Afghanistan, they have faced systemic discrimination. So, that was exacerbated by years of war and the imposition of restrictive social norms. And today, it remains a pivotal case study in understanding the repercussions of foreign involvement in national conflicts. So this is the one thing. Another thing, the interplay of historical invasions, cultural diversity, and ongoing struggles for power that continues to shape its political landscape and making it a complex yet essential topic for analyzing contemporary global politics, not only the domestic politics. Because if we look at the women issue, it is basically a global problem. While comprehending it, the whole scenario. So I think the notion of turn is very pertinent here, because if we see since 1919, so one comes and then I'm thrown out into power. So that's why the turn is very important here. So when I try to understand this turn, so I came across a book written by American philosopher Richard Rorty. So he has written a book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. So he was basically discussing the concept of a turn in the history of philosophy. So I tried to use this concept, while understanding Afghanistan. So he suggests that with each turn, I quote, so he has written this in 1979. So you can go through and read the page 263 where he has quoted this. I quote him: "A new set of problems emerges, and the old one begins to fade away." So unquote. So this idea basically it resonates strongly within the field of not only the international politics but also the domestic politics. Okay. So where significant theoretical shifts such as constructive turn, linguistic turn, and practice turn, or we can say aesthetic turn. So all these are important to understand women issue in Afghanistan, and these turns they have opened new avenues for understanding the complex domestic as well as the global issues. So if I look at the constructive term, that is very important. So it basically emphasizes how identities and interests are socially constructed, so rather than given. So in Afghanistan, the diverse ethnic and cultural identities such as Pashtun, Tajik, Hazara, and Uzbek, they highlight the constructed nature of national identity. So the shifting narratives surrounding these identities, it especially in the context of this particular problem that women are facing, or the earlier speaker was talking about the totalitarian regime. It basically highlights how social constructs shape political realities. So this is the one thing. And language perspective, if you see the linguistic term, so the narratives surrounding the Taliban's governance, or Western intervention or the rights of women and minorities, they are deeply intertwined with the use of language. The way these issues are framed in media and political discourse influence public perception and policy responses. That illustrates the power of language in political context. Then the practical practices, okay? So if it is the practices of governance, the resistance, and the community organization, that all reveals how power is exercised not just through formal institutions but also through informal networks and local customs. So Michel Foucault is very important while understanding this over here. But I'm not going to deal with Michel Foucault. So it would be then long presentation. So then if we see, these terms, what they basically does, they redirect our focus to emergent problems, particularly regarding the relationship between performativity and the power. So in this case, if we will see, this lens is particularly illuminating related to Afghan politics. This is the one thing. So while having a better grasp related to Afghan politics and the implications for peace building that we see when NATO intervened in Afghanistan. So the focus was particularly on the peace building as well as to rebuild Afghanistan from the war and social cohesion. Particularly in this historically conflicted society, but very interesting if we look at this term war on terror.
Right, I'm afraid Professor Wani may have dropped out, and in that case, I think we might move directly to the presentation of Dr. Mahdavi, and we can perhaps come back to Dr. Wani. So, Amir Hussain Mahdavi is a PhD candidate in the Department of Political Science at the University of Connecticut. So he's still early in his day, I imagine. And he's going to present today on the rise of populism in Iran, equality, class conflict, and nationalist authoritarianism. So, Amir, do you have a PowerPoint presentation today? Your audio is a little unclear. The question was, do you have a PowerPoint that you'd like to share on the screen?
Can you hear me?
It's not too clear, I'm afraid.
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I think the connection is a bit unstable, I have to say.
I don't know what's the reason, because I don't see difficulty in the video works. So the voice is low, the connection is unstable. What's the problem right now?
Yes, the the audio is a bit garbled. We see your screen very clearly, but the audio is a little challenged. It could be a microphone issue. We also had trouble with Dr. Wani. He also dropped out. So
Is it better right now?
I'm just looking at the time.
Is it better right now?
It's a little better.
Oh, I don't know what's the problem is. Is it the problem that everyone is saying so nobody can hear me? I'm afraid that it's
No, the sound is there. We certainly have some sound, but it is very unclear and very garbled, as if there's a problem with the microphone. Are you using the computer microphone?
different right now. Is it better?
It's pretty much the same.
Is it better right now?
No, it's pretty much the same. Would it be helpful perhaps to log out and log in again?
Can you hear me better right now?
That's much better. That is
I am
much
using
better.
another
That's much clearer.
microphone.
Okay. Would you like
So I
to
hope so.
present with
Hopefully,
a PowerPoint today?
okay. Let me getting started by showing the first slide.
Okay.
It's out to be 15 minutes. Am I correct?
15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, sure. So is the PowerPoint shared right now?
Yes, it is. It's very clear. Do you want to
Great.
press or do you want to select that's the one? Terrific. And the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm so delightful to be in this panel among the great scholars who are contributing to the literature of populism. And thanks to the Center for inviting me. I try and will do my best to be strict in 15 minutes presentation. So I am going to talk about the possibility and the chance of raising populist factions or leaders in the Iranian political atmosphere today. So for doing that, I will go examine the both right-wing and left-wing populism and their in the context of Iran and ground them in the context and try to relate the components of each kind of populism with the different aspects of socio-political landscaping of Iran today. First, I'm going to start with the left-wing populism, especially because that we saw an episode of left-wing populism about 15 years ago, between 20 and 15 years ago, that was able to won the 2005 election, and we had about 6 or 7 years of implementation of left-wing populist ideas by the former president Ahmadinejad. And then I'm gonna move to the right-wing populism as the most viable probability and option of raising populism in the Iranian context today. So by left-wing populism, simply I focused on like the measures like social justice, opposition to economic inequality, and the perceived dominance of large corporation and financial elites. So I just wanted to clarify what components I am thinking about when I talk about left-wing populism. So I'm gonna examine the 4 main ideas and the 4 main pillars of left-wing populism that can be related to the Iranian context right now. First, economic inequality and social justice. Now we have a situation under economic sanction due to the nuclear program which is in place. The sanctions that are in place, I think, right now is about 2 decades, and the most severe version of those implemented by President Trump in 2017, and it's continued up to today. So a combination of economic sanctions and domestic economic mismanagements and failed policies raise the inequality to the historic level in the economic history of Iran. In particular, I'm talking about the Gini coefficient and the ratio of the top 1% income to the low 10%. The ratio of top 1% to the low 10% is higher than even any developed world, except United States of America and most of the and all of the Iran neighbors and Middle Eastern countries. So to just make a political sense of this kind of inequality which is in place right now in Iran, you can think about the country that's one top the 1% on the top of income ranking, enjoy quality of life and income and wealth, and are considered as rich in the level and standard of a rich person in Western world, in London, in Paris, in New York. So so you can I am talking about properties and apartments in northern Tehran, many with the price of more than $3 million. And the income level, that's when we exchange an equivalent and exchange and change that to the dollar, which is exactly the same as the median of top 10% in the United States. So a very, very, very rich class on top, and the historic number of 35% under poverty. And some scholars believe that 30% or 25% of them are under, like in the situation of very harsh, severe poverty. I mean, are not able to secure 2,000 calories per day for themselves. So we have this kind of political sense of inequality and absence of social justice among people, which is a very good and ready, which makes a very good and ready and vast constituency for left-wing populism discourses. Another one is opposition to neoliberal and austerity policies. This is the case in Iran right now, as I said, regarding the inequality and the high and the and having 1/3 of population under poverty. Many failure of government policies are being attributed to neoliberalism. So basically, the high inflation, I am talking about more than a 40% inflation in last 4 years, the high inflation, which is basically caused by the budget deficit of government, by sanction, and by mismanagement and wrong policies, mostly are attributed to neoliberal policies. For instance, I'm talking about the government's shortage to fund schools and health sector, and trying to privatize those sectors. We know that his intention comes from budget deficit and not from like picking neoliberalism as economic orientation and major policy of the country, but left-wing populists try to conceptualize and frame that as a neoliberal tendency of government. The next one is advocacy for rights of marginal groups. This is again the case because many of the marginal groups, low-income people, were able to put together the most active social movements in recent years in Iran, namely labor and teacher movements. So they are being a very good capacity, very good potential for the left-wing populist discourses to invest on as their prospective constituents. So we have many episodes of protest and engagement and organized collective action by laborers and teachers that are thriving to have their political representation, to obtain their rights and basically improve their economic life. And the last characteristic that I want to examine in the context of Iran is criticism of global capitalism and large corporation. Again, the largest corporation in Iran are governmental, so the problem, especially labor issues in those industries are all being related to the government policies. At the same time, many privatization policies and many factories and other governmental companies are being sold to the private sector these years. They had no choice to sustain themselves and to make profit by getting rid of their surplus costs, lay off many workers. So all of these kind of dynamics are attributed to the capitalist kind of policies and make those policies so negative in the eyes of more educated social strata. In addition to that, I want to emphasize many parts of the global liberal or left discourses that are being suppressed by the regime, by the governments, like women rights or sexual minority rights. They are not a result of really right conservative policies in the democratic sense, but because of those kind of suppression, more parts of the society are being interested in left-wing political platforms that may arise from this kind of context. So, and in the second part, I want to discuss the same actually trends in right. I would argue that because of the context and recent developments, especially in recent decades, the likelihood and the potential for rising right-wing populism is more than left-wing, especially because of the government budget shortage and its incapability to redistribute resources in the sense of state capacity and in the sense of having enough resources to redistribute among poor. So I don't. It would be so hard for a leftist populist leader or politician to emerge and with the platform and campaign pledge and promises to redistribute many resources or promise for give more like welfare benefits to people. So every discussion today, especially in light of the persistence of the international sanction, is about budget cut, is about lowering the government responsibility in economy and to reduce the budget deficit and eventually the inflation rate. So it's very hard of thinking of giving promises and selling those kind of political plans to people to give them more welfare, health, education, or other public goods. However, there is, in my analysis, there is a very good potential to right-wing discourses to raise. By right-wing, I mean the discourses and the camp that often emphasize on the nationalism, anti-immigration policies, a strong stance against political elites, globalism, and multiculturalism. So we can see the potential and the components of that are compatible with the every three main ideas of right-wing populism are in place in Iran today. So first, nationalism and anti-immigration. There is a very heated national debate about the Afghani refugees and migrants in country. Unfortunately, the government, I think, doesn't have a accurate statistic about the demography of those migrants. How many of them are legal? How many are illegal? We don't have we don't have actually any official statistic and data about them, but people are talking about 7 million, 8 million, 6 million immigrants, and a jump in recent year after Taliban came to power. So in many neighborhoods, even in southern Tehran, in many capitals of different provinces, we see neighborhoods with the majority of Afghani immigrants. People reside there. Many schools, pictures and videos are being are going viral today these days about the schools that the majority of the students are Afghan, the hospitals and every kind of a public domain, that the people of the Afghani people are more than Iranian in some part of the country, and especially we are talking in the era of downturn economy. So people are concerned about the job opportunity. People are concerned about whether the illegal Afghan immigrants are paying tax or not. Do they send the money they make in Iran to Afghanistan? So look that as an issue of capital flow from the country to outside. So all of these kind of aspects and different dimension of anti-immigration discourses are very alive and vivid in political discussions today. That is a very, very important trigger and reason that could boost right-wing populism. Another one is opposition to political elite and globalism. I think globalism is less the case in Iranian context, but this appointment to political elites is a very, very visible issue. We just had the presidential election, the first round in June, by lowest turnout in 46 years, 39% turnout. That is an indicator of disappointment about political elites and the two major camps within Islamic republics that the power is being rotated among them: executive power and the unelected power, unelected part of the state as well. So again, I think there is a considerable portion in the society that would welcome a new voice, and very the classic rhetoric of right-wing populism, by opposing the political elites, opposing the bureaucracy, the all procedures, laws and regulation and establishment, and climb for new policies and new setting of the whole state. And the last one is preservation of traditional cultural values. This could be compatible to the case, but not in the sense of traditional or / conservative cultural values. I would say the values that are in tension with the official values and beliefs that are trying to impose in society by the regime. So many discourses about the pre-Islam era, the cultural components, the components of the Iranian culture from pre-Islam years are being borrowed and try to invite them to the political scene and use them as a politicize them and use them as use them as an instrument of political discussion today. So this tension between Iranian nationalism and Islam and Sharia law in a way that is being implemented officially by the states is a very like a live tension and a hot source of debate that would mobilize people around more nationalistic approaches. So we see both kind of both these set of reasons and potentials in the context of Iranian society right now. As I said, in my opinion, I would say the possibility of rising right-wing discourses is higher than left-wing, but the left-wing discourses are in place, are in the like good stand compared to let's say 10 years ago, inspired by many external and internal reason. And I would be so happy to go dig in more and go to more details in Q&A part and answer your question and raise more example about the relevance of each components of populism with the current political situation in Iran. Thank you, and looking forward to hearing your question.
Thank you, Amir, and thank you so much for persisting through the tech issues. We heard some real interesting tech issues today, so thank you very much for persisting. We still indeed have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So as with the previous session, we already have some questions in the chat, and if people want to ask questions through the raise hand function, that option is available to you as well. So I see the first hand raised was Shuman Kumar Raj. If you'd like to come in and ask your question to Amir, please.
Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Go ahead. Yes, absolutely. Ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. So this is Anshuman Kumar Raj from India. So first of all, thank you, Amir, for such a wonderful presentation about left-wing populism and right-wing populism. So when you were mentioning about the left-wing populism, you were discussing about main ideas, and there it was opposition to neoliberalism. So when we study neoliberalism, we know that since the beginning of 1970s and 80s, the idea of neoliberal has been spread to each and every part of the world, and they have built a sense of consent on the basis of false consciousness among the people that this system is for a greater emancipation of people. But in reality, we know the drawbacks within this system, what is the fall inside the system. So could you please explain how the left-wing populism is fighting against this system, or what are the tools or methods they are using to fight against this system? Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I am talking mostly about the intellectual part. Excuse me, should I answer each question after each?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
So yes, I am talking about the rise of the discourse in intellectual and grassroots level both, but it could be inside the state or outside the state. So I am not addressing the exact political implication and the dynamics that would contribute or predicting about how they would elevate and gain power, for instance. I am just more concerned about the more concentrate about the rise of these discourses in both intellectual and grassroots level, among ordinary people and the daily discussions, and the intellectual and academic level as well. But making a left-wing populism happen in the sense of power could happen from within the state. So we have like many, for instance, the new president that just came to power 2 months ago. His discourse, many parts of his discourse, or I would say the what is stated by his follower can be compatible to the left-wing populism, especially in terms of economic policies, maybe, or at least are more visible compared to the previous presidents. And we have we are seeing the very visible desire for left-wing populist ideas, especially about the redistribution and restructuring the power of the government and the full intervention. For instance, undoing the privatization policies, getting back the privatized companies, and these kind of discourses. And at the same time, we have the same discourse outside the regime and among people who are considered as a opposition of regime. I don't know to what extent I was able to answer your question, but no, I don't have any like particular prediction about how they're gonna involve in the state and how they can gain power and execute their policies.
Thank you, Amir. Bulent, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahdavi. My question is actually a bit different. I wonder about what roles have the Revolutionary Guard and the Iran security elite alongside the clerical class played in the rise of theocratic authoritarianism and authoritarian populism in Iran, particularly in the context of inequality, class conflict, and nationalist authoritarianism, as you mentioned in your presentation. And to what extent does the Revolutionary Guard's involvement in the economy and the politics exacerbate these issues? Thank you.
Excuse me, can I actually ask you that you are basically asking about the contribution of theoretical issues and religious in each of these two?
Yeah, many pundits and many researchers define Iranian regime no longer as a kind of clerical theocratical regime, but a regime under the influence of the security elite. So when we discuss the security elite, the main actor is the Revolutionary Guard, and the Revolutionary Guard try to influence all segments of the society and the cultural area, education, social classes, the economy. They have many big companies. So I wonder really what the role in terms of this populism's manifestation in Iran and what the role they play this authoritarian style.
Thank you. You tackled a very important issue, and thank you for your interesting question. You are right. The IRGC Revolutionary Guard is a part of every kind of socio-political discussion in Iran and the populism as well. Actually, we can argue in either way. We can think about that and the entity as a great force for delivering right-wing populism. So we can actually see in their rhetoric, in their cultural products, in their discourses, they try to incorporate nationalism in their discourses much today compared to years ago. I mean, the balance and the ratio of Islamic and Iranic share in their discourses, and try to portray themselves as a protector of country more than the religious itself. So yes, in this sense, they can be a contributor to the right-wing populism discourse, and maybe in some sense, especially regarding the failure of the administration in delivering the major task of the government. I would say today the ratio and the budget is allocated to delivering public good, like police budget, education, and health. when we consider the prices constant, today is even lower than 1980s after the revolution and during the war with Iraq. So you can think about the very poor and the trouble that we are seeing in delivering public goods. So the failure of the administration itself is a very good land for investing for armed forces, Revolutionary Guard to raise as a defender of people, defender of national identity, and a solution for the people who have no trust in civilian administration. So this is the case that we watched all over the world, and the Iranian history about one century ago in the rise of the Pahlavi monarchy. And we can see that again, and we can see many kind of the right-wing policies that can be implemented, left-wing populism component that can be delivered and can be heard from IRGC and its ally and its surrounding people and institutions. I co-authored the piece in Foreign Affairs, I think that was 2020, about their involvement in addressing COVID-19 pandemic, distributing goods, foods, and actually portraying themselves as a guardian of the poorest people and the poorest class in country, especially regarding their cluster-like a structure all over the country, in countryside, in rural part of the country, as the source of distributing goods, foods, and even they have tours, bring doctors, dentists to the parts of the country and to the neighborhoods that people would never be able to buy that kind of health services in private sector. So I would say I agree completely, and they would be a major source of reliance for both right and left-wing populism, and maybe they can deliver that by themselves, and obviously no actor within the system can think about raising those kind of policies without cooperation of Revolutionary Guard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. That's fantastic, and it covered quite a few of the questions that we had also in the chat. I have a question. I know he left office in 2013, but you mentioned him at the beginning of your talk. You mentioned Ahmadinejad, and it just struck me that, you know, the 2 terms of his presidency seem to be seem to exemplify a kind of perfect confluence of a whole series of aspects of populism that we study here at the ECPS. You know, he seemed to have mastered the art of kind of charismatic mobilization. You know, he got massive crowds after Friday prayers, and his message of economic redistribution, state intervention, and anti-imperialism, that seemed to be a really potent mix of populist mobilization for that period. You know, in the late 2000s into the 2010s. What's the legacy, do you think, of Ahmadinejad in terms of the kind of current trends and currents of probably left-wing populism in Iran today?
Thank you for this important and so relevant, for raising this important and so relevant question. I would lay out the legacy of that 2 terms, especially the first 6 years of his presidency, in 2 senses. First, the legacies that that are still contributing to the desire for a left-wing kind of populism. For instance, I am talking about the nuclear policies and the sanctions, and for the first time the Iranian nuclear file was sent by the International Atomic Agency to the Security Council, and many resolutions was passed at his term that those are the basis of the sanctions that are suffering the country today. So I would attribute the decline in the economic growth, almost 0% growth in a decade of 2010 to 2020, and major increase in the number of people under poverty, to the sanction which is inherited, which is part of his legacy. Another one, I would say, the making people like entitled more to the feeling more entitled to the redistribution policies. He initiated the cash transfer economic policy for the first time, and at the beginning that was like a major amount. I would say $50 per month per person. So you can think about it for a householder with the size of 5 members, $250 a month would be a major income from government in rural parts of Iran that people received, so those kind of expectation, hiring the economic expectation from the government, that was a major legacy, and that is the source of his popularity in every survey and political polls that conducts nowadays. And another one was the destructive policy, I would say, in administration level. So with the climb of by accusing the administration and the deep state as a major source of the national problems, he tried to change the format of administration, try to pack the administration by new people, and change the structure, change the charter, change the organizations. So this kind of making this kind of reform and changing the administration and dividing the tasks among the different parts of the executive branch itself, and transferring many tasks to the entities that are being called as a public non-governmental entities, which are basically subordinate to the Supreme Leader office, and their involvements in economy increased in a major sense during Ahmadinejad. So we have some external pressure, we have some internal administrative deformation, I would say, and we have more redistributive expectation among masses. I would classify his three main legacies in that way.
Thank you, Amir. That's really fantastic. It seems like it's still a really relevant and salient topic. We are coming towards the end of the panel today, but we are scheduled to finish at 10 past. I sort of put a general call out. Does anyone else have a question for Amir? Unfortunately, Dr. Wani is having some trouble getting back into the meeting, but if there are any other questions for Amir. If not, I think we might bring today's discussion gradually to a close. I want to thank everyone today for persevering through the technical challenges we've had. It's been a real difficult situation today, managing all of these technical issues, but I think we've done okay. And I want to thank especially our four wonderful panelists, Dr. Hélène Thibault, Dr. Adeli, Dr. Wani, and of course Amir Mahdavi, who presented on populism in Iran. It's been a really stimulating panel. I really appreciate everybody coming together and for the wonderful contributions that we've had today. So on behalf of the ECPS, I'd like to thank you for joining us today and look forward to our next panel. Thanks.
So, dear distinguished panelists, thank you so much for these so insightful presentations, and Simon for your great moderation and assessments. So, dear attendees, you enriched the panel with questions and remarks, and it was very interesting. Please mark your calendars for our next panel on October 31st, 2024. Please remember to register and join us to discuss the challenging dynamics of democracy, authoritarianism, and populism in Caucasus, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. I wish you all a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. You did really well. Terrific stuff. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to the organizers and audience. Goodbye.
Goodbye.